Well, good morning, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this first of all, Happy New Year to those of you watching. Uh, been a big year, 2024. 2025 is looking up even more. We've got a lot of things that we're very excited for at Border Church and at With Girded Sword. That's our ministry. And welcome to the first of our 31 days of... we're just going to be doing 31 days of Proverbs chapter... Well, all of the chapters. 31 chapters in Proverbs, 31 days in January. So we are doing this to basically celebrate the new year with wisdom. And so I'm going to try. It's been a big day, first day of the new year, mostly because our daughter is deciding to go through a growth spurt. I wanted to do this earlier in the day, but she didn't do a long enough nap. So I'll try to get on track tomorrow with this, but I'm going to go through Proverbs chapter 1 because I don't want to miss a day. I really don't want to miss a day, even though I'm kind of just after midnight and it's actually the second, but I haven't slept, so it's still still day one for me. I'm going to go through Proverbs chapter 1 and do a little bit of a discussion on structure, but I don't want to make these too long. What I might do is if throughout this process I might get some guests on to talk about some of the chapters with me, maybe some people from Border Church, maybe some friends from further abroad, just to go through some of these chapters and see what their thoughts are. But let's have a prayer and let's get into it. Father in heaven, I just want to thank you so much for your word, for a new year, for wisdom itself. We ask for wisdom now to understand what the Bible says about wisdom. We're thankful for the fact that you've put this book here in the Bible, and we want to praise you for making wisdom available to us. I pray for all of those who are out there who are celebrating a new year, those who have made resolutions, those who are seeking revolutions in their life. I just pray that you will be near to each one of us through 2025, as you always are, and bring us further into that life of abundance. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I've been doing some reading through Proverbs over the last few days and weeks as I've been anticipating doing this series. And it's interesting, I had different view of Proverbs before going into this than I do even just starting. So I've read through Proverbs many times, and I'd never thought deeply about it. And, maybe I had an idea, kind of a naive idea, that this was like a book that it's very formulaic. Maybe it was very formulaic. If you live your life according to these things, then you will, you'll get this outcome. Do this, and this is the result. And for the most part, that's true. However, maybe it's because during December we did deep dive December in our church, and I chose Job for that. And Job's obviously a person of righteousness. He's a person of moral uprightness and devotion to God. And you'd imagine that he does all of these things. He does most of the things the good things in the book of Proverbs. And yet calamity still comes for him. He still suffers loss. He still suffers, people dying, and he doesn't have that abundance. Now, I prayed for abundance, and I'll come back to this in a moment. I don't believe in a prosperity gospel to an extent. I believe that we lay up treasure in heaven. I don't believe this earth is our home. That said, there are things that you can do that can increase your chances of prosperity. So I guess what I'm saying is that the book of Proverbs, which I thought in terms of a more naive, formulaic approach in the past, do this, you achieve this. I'm now starting to see it more as a probability multiplier. So these are not promises. Proverbs are not promises. They are principles that extend your chances of success, your chances of prosperity, your chances of abundance, your chances of a life that is more enriched. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't, like Job, still suffer calamities for things outside of your own actions, but this is tipping the scales. The book of Proverbs is to tip the scales. In fact, the word proverb in the Hebrew means likeness. Okay, it's the word that mashal, which means likeness, and it can refer to these are things that bring us into these can be object lessons. These can be these short little, pithy statements that we see here. It's bringing us closer to something. It's bringing us closer to an ideal. And if we dwell on the Proverbs, and as I have done many, many times over my walk as a Christian, I've picked up this book and I've found blessing in there. And if we do follow the things in there, we will be blessed. We will be blessed above and beyond what we would be if we didn't follow them. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So Proverbs to me is a blessing multiplier. That's what this is for. It's for multiplying your blessings. Because God's always trying to pour out blessings, but sometimes we can't receive them without our own action. So anyway, that's where I'll leave that. We're going to go through this and we're going to read it. I just want to talk a little bit about structure of the book first. So structure, Proverbs has 31 chapters. That's why we're doing it in January, which has 31 days. I will do my best to do one every single day, even if I have to wait up until everyone's asleep and I've achieved all of my chores and stuff. Some of them will be longer, some will be shorter. I think I'll try and get some with guests, as I said. The structure of the book, the first 9 chapters, so you've got chapters 1 through 9, which are a series of speeches by the father, which is Solomon. And so there's 10 speeches in Proverbs chapters 1 to 7. And in chapters 1 to 9, there's also 4 speeches of Lady Wisdom. She speaks in this first chapter that we will see today. She speaks in chapter 3, and then she speaks for all of chapters 8 and 9, essentially. So you've got that's the first part. The things that we think of as Proverbs they don't begin until chapter 10, really. And so chapter 10 through to chapter 29, so chapters 10 to 29, this is these are the Proverbs. And there are Proverbs of Solomon, which is generally taken to be the most authentic ones. The ones from Solomon are chapters 10 to 22, and then you have from chapter 22. There's sayings of the wise. These might have been collected by Solomon or added after his time by other compilers. More sayings of the wise in chapter 24. And then at the end, you've got these 2 chapters that are kind of like epilogue chapters. Chapter 30, which is the words of Agur, and then you've got the words of Lemuel in chapter 31. Now, I mean, the reason I look at structure is often to go, okay, what can I learn about how this writing is being, is delivered to us. So it looks like we've got introductory chapters about wisdom, like the speeches of the father and of Lady Wisdom are about the abstract, what wisdom is. What is wisdom? What is its purpose? What does it do? Whereas the, chapters 10 onwards is the, what is wisdom, what constitutes wisdom in more specific circumstances. And as we will see, there's no organization. There's not like, this is the chapter on wise dealings in business. This is the chapter on wise dealings in, family relations. This is that would be helpful to us, but that's not how it is. And so we're going to find that it's something that you can get a highlighter or multiple highlighters and just start going nuts at. There are different ways you might want to, as we go through, okay, this one's for business, this one's for such and such. You might want to journal them and put them in titles, like under titles or topics. Some of them might apply to multiple ones, and we'll discuss that as we get to those. Interestingly, there's this kind of inclusio. So an inclusio is where you've got two different bookends to it. So the first few chapters, they talk about Lady Wisdom, while the final chapter speaks about this woman of valor, this woman of virtue, and the qualities that she has, which is like almost like a description of Lady Wisdom. And that's because wisdom as a word in the Hebrew is chokhmah, and it's feminine. Wisdom is a feminine Hebrew word. And we'll talk about that more as we go through these studies, because we'll talk about the Lady Wisdom. So she's personified, at least in the first chapters, as this lady because of the feminine. And it's not that every word in Hebrew is either masculine or feminine. Tables, chairs, chariots. You name it. It's cities. They've got a gender. It's a grammatical gender, not a natural gender. And so because wisdom has the grammatical gender of feminine, it is described in female qualities, having female qualities. So that's just to talk about that. Now, we will go through... I'm going to be using... Now, I recommend getting a really good Bible for different things. I'm using my NET Bible, which is the New English translation. It's got 60,932 notes there. This is just this is the first page of Proverbs. It's only got the first 6 verses, and it's got all the notes. So this is really helpful to me, because it's like having a commentary in my Bible. And there's a bit of repetition on some things, but I'll be able to pick some of these things out and go, hey, this is some really interesting things to think about, especially as we're looking at this opening introduction. So let's just start reading. The first section is basically just an introduction. It's like a purpose statement for the book, and it's the first 6 verses. And so I'll read it, and then we'll just discuss it. It says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to learn wisdom and moral instruction, and to discern wise counsel, to receive moral instruction in skillful living, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to impart shrewdness to the morally naive, and a discerning plan to the young person. Let the wise also hear and gain instruction. Let the discerning acquire guidance, to discern the meaning of a proverb and a parable, the sayings of the wise and their riddles. Okay, now, pretty much almost every major word here has a note. As I've already mentioned what Proverbs means, and this is being attributed to Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Solomon is a name that means peace, so these are proverbs of peace, you could even say. So Proverbs of Solomon, Proverbs of peace. Here we have so that's just verse 1. It's the authorship, at least the original authorship. Solomon acts as also a compiler and a and there may have been people who edited it after him. We know that's the case, for example, in Moses, the 5 books of Moses. I mean, the death narrative of Moses, he didn't write that because he was dead. Or at least, he might have been resurrected by that stage and taken to heaven. Now, let's go through here. So from verse 2 to 6, you've got 5 purpose statements, and we know this because of the Hebrew construction. And so verse 2, the first purpose statement, to learn wisdom and moral instruction and to discern wise counsel. Now, the word wisdom, I mentioned that, and this word, yours might say to know wisdom. Mine has learn because, to gain, the word yada means to gain knowledge or to become wise in. So really it means to become wise in wisdom. To become wise in wisdom, which is a good, one of those good redundancies, because it's emphasizing the coming into acquisition of wisdom. Now, the word wisdom, it can mean moral skill. It really means skill. Throughout the Bible, this word wisdom is used for people who God gave the ability to craft the tabernacle, for example. It can refer to people who, sail ships. It's applied knowledge. We think of wisdom more in terms of the passive side, but it's a very active word. This kokma. It means to have an applied knowledge, take knowledge to applied skill. So it's skillful application of things. So it says, to learn wisdom and moral instruction, and to discern, wise counsel. So the word discern meaning, to be able to divide between two things. So that's purpose 1. Purpose 1 is what? It's to learn, to acquire, become wise in wisdom, and be able to recognize wise counsel. Number 2, to receive moral instruction in skillful living, in righteousness, justice, and equity. So it's moving from just acquiring wisdom to the outcomes of wisdom, which is righteousness, justice, and equity. And these words here mean self-discipline they follow self-discipline. So what righteousness, tzedek, this is the one that means meeting a standard, meeting up to a standard, conformity to a standard. Justice, it means, it's mishpat, which refers to the ability to make a decision that is just. So one is conforming to a standard, another one is making a decision based on that standard, while equity is yashar, which means to be without bias, I guess. So these are all, you can see throughout scriptures. I had a look, and there are places where these are frequently found in synonymous relationship to each other. They have a large semantic overlap. So first is to acquire wisdom. Second is to have that shown in righteousness, in conforming to the standard, in justice and equity. Number 4 is to impart shrewdness to the morally naive and a discerning plan to the young person. So the purpose of wisdom is not just to acquire it, but to pass it on. Okay, so to pass it on to to especially to young people, to people who are growing up. That's definitely something I'm interested in with Victor. So it is. This is a much better translation, by the way, because when I first read through this week, I read through the whole of Proverbs. It was with a different translation, and I'm finding this one much clearer. Find a couple of translations so that you get a three-dimensional view of the text if you like. So then there's this parenthetical statement in verse 15, just because it's a slightly different starting of the sentence. So it is, where have we got? It's in between two of the purpose statements. So you've got the purpose statements of verses 2 to 4, and then in verse 5, it's basically saying that this is let the wise. So this is only not for new people, but wise people can come back to this book. It's not just for someone who is acquiring wisdom, but if you're already wise, come back and just refresh. And I find that interesting because how often do we think about that when it comes to other skills, like going back and refreshing on mathematics or refreshing on basic English or whatever languages that we're proficient in or anything like that. I like going back, and I mean, that's why you teach. We'll be homeschooling Victor, and even now, you're going through and you get a new appreciation for what you learned yourself. So let the wise also hear and gain instruction. Wisdom really leads you to a point where you want to gain more wisdom. You're not satisfied, and you're not ever feeling like you've arrived. So I like that parenthetical statement. The final purpose statement is in verse 6, and it says, to discern the meaning of a proverb and a parable, and the sayings of the wise and their riddles. So I find this this is basically different to the other statements. This is kind of like, okay, now we're getting into it. So you're going to need to use the wisdom that the first three purposes were about to discern the meanings of the proverbs and the parables. I mean, Jesus, when he came, he spoke in proverbs, he spoke in parables, knowing that a lot of people wouldn't understand him. That was actually part of the purpose, because he wanted people to dig deep. He wanted people to go deeper to be able to get what he was saying. And we see that in the parable of the sower. That's what he said. He said, I came here so that hearing they would not hear, and seeing they would not see. Not because Jesus didn't want people to get it. It's that he wanted you to have to hunger and thirst after it. He wanted you to he wanted them to be riddles that you think about over and over again. It's what I like about the Bible, is no matter how many times I've read it, I still get something out of it. I still get more and more. And so I'm looking forward to going through Proverbs again. This might become a yearly thing that I do from now on, to go through Proverbs at the beginning of the year, to start my year with wisdom, and maybe it's something you could do. Okay, so those are the purpose statements, and then we get into the first speech of the Father, and it starts with these words: fearing the Lord, or fear of the Lord, is the beginning of wisdom, or moral knowledge. Mine translates it as moral knowledge, and I'll just go through. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. So what we're going to see is throughout here, there's going to be a lot of statements like this, where it says a positive and then it says the corresponding negative clause. So the first clause here is, fear of the Lord is the beginning of moral wisdom, moral knowledge. And the second one is, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And these are to make it memorable in terms of the proverb itself. They're called antithetical parallels, antithetical parallelism, and they're to make it easy to memorize, but also to draw out the contrast between someone who is wise and someone who is a fool. So we're going to see Lady Wisdom, but there's also Lady Folly in these first chapters. because people tend to be on one side of or another in terms of wisdom or folly. And that doesn't mean that someone's always a fool or someone's always wise, but in a specific action, you're a fool or you're wise. That's kind of how it breaks down, depending on what you've decided to do, how you've applied yourself in that moment. So fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, this word fear, it's yirat, and the word fear in Hebrew can mean either terror or reverence and awe. I think it means both here. And why is fear of the Lord the beginning of wisdom? Because, I want to go back to Job, what I was reading in Job. The three friends of Job and Job himself both made the mistake of forgetting that they're part of a bigger picture. When you acknowledge God, that's the start of being able to piece together the world. Because God created the world, He's intimately active in the world, and it's through that, acknowledging that one thing, whether it's in terror or in reverence, that you start to, that's where wisdom starts. Now, the word for beginning can mean two things as well. It can either mean it's the starting point. The starting point of wisdom is fearing the Lord, reverencing and acknowledging the Lord. And now, you cannot have an encounter with God, a real encounter with God, without either awe or terror. They're like flip sides of the same coin. I mean, like the space between the truly reverencing this almighty being who created and rules over the whole universe is, between reverence and just absolute horror at how small you are in comparison, and how much power he has. I mean, it's just a hair between those two things. And so it can mean either the beginning, or it can mean it is the place at which it's the most important part of wisdom. And I think it can mean both again in this instance. That's Hebrew thinking for you. Both and, not either or. There doesn't have to be an either or when there's like a range of things. Now, sometimes there is, sometimes like here there isn't. But fools despise, it means they have hatred towards, they treat with contempt wisdom and instruction. And we could probably all look back on times where we have ignored instruction from people who we should have listened to. Listen, my child, to the instruction from your father. Do not forsake the teaching from your mother, for they will be like an elegant garland on your head and like pendants around your neck. Now, interesting thing is that if we think about this as Solomon writing this, he's probably originally writing this to his child, and this may have been instruction for his child. Now, who was his son that took the throne was Rehoboam, and he's suggesting that don't despise wisdom. But again, we have that exception. This is a person who chose not to. He chose the foolish route. You can go and read about that in Kings and Chronicles. Rehoboam split the whole kingdom of David and Solomon by basically annoying, the northern 10 tribes, so that they seceded from the union. They seceded from the kingdom and started their own northern kingdom of Israel. So that's Rehoboam. If only he had not despised instruction, wisdom and instruction, and he had listened to his father and his mother. And so this garland on your head, this is, obviously a wreath. This is a signature, a symbol of victory. That this will be a source of victory if you listen to your parents with their wisdom, you will have victory. Now, sometimes your parents aren't wise, but we have, this is our spiritual fathers put this in the Bible. Solomon is the wisest person on earth, besides Jesus, and so we have reason to look at this. So let's keep going from verse 10. My child, if sinners try to entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, we will lie in wait to shed blood. We will ambush an innocent person capriciously. That's a word we don't often use. Capriciously. It means without cause. It means without reason. We will swallow them alive like Sheol. Sheol is the place, the resting place of the dead. It's the grave. We'll swallow them alive like the grave, Sheol. Those full of vigor like those going down to the pit. We will seize all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with plunder. Join with us. We will all share equally in what we steal. My child, do not go down their way. Withhold yourself from their path, for they are eager to inflict harm, for they hasten to shed blood. Surely it is futile to spread a net in plain sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. Such are the ways of all who gain profit unjustly. It takes away the life of those who obtain it. Now, this is interesting, this speech here, because he's saying, don't go with the people who say, come on, we're gonna rob this person, this innocent person. Now, most of us might go, well, obviously not. Obviously, I'm not going to go and beat someone and murder them for their riches. Interestingly, Solomon is the product of someone who had done that. David had, raped almost, essentially, yeah, he used his power to coerce Bathsheba into his bed, murdering Uriah. Just interesting, just come to me. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Now, Solomon wasn't the product of that first one, that first attempt. That child died, but Solomon was a later child of David and Bathsheba. And so most of us might go, yeah, like, we're not going to do that. But have you ever, forget the physical riches, have you ever spoken ill of someone to tarnish their reputation so that you can elevate yourself? That would come under this as well. Have you ever joined in gossip? Have you ever joined in humiliating or mocking someone? This is something that we do. We can easily get carried away with. Many of us might be able to look at our childhood and go, yeah, I ran with the wrong crowd at times, and we did some stupid stuff. Well, this is kind of some of the ways you can apply this, because you've robbed. Now, there are other ways we can steal from people today. We can steal from people by, the way that we conduct ourselves, not to steal financially from them, but we steal their identity, their sense of identity, their sense of purpose. Might be the way that we steal joy from people. Lots of things that we do for our kicks, and he's saying, don't do that. Don't get carried away. If sinners try to entice you, don't consent. I like this image here. It is futile to spread a net in plain sight of any bird. The idea that like a bird, what bird's going to fly into a net that they can see? You've got to do it in a hidden way. So what he's saying here is that they are really setting the trap for themselves. The things that they're doing are going to have eternal negative consequences. Like, this is the place that their reward will be. They'll only be able to rob for a time, and it'll be here. and then thereafter they are, they're not going to get anything out of it. It's a For me, this is interesting, because most of what Proverbs is saying is not focused on, like, as we go through, we're going to see most of what Proverbs has to say is about the here and now, how to, choose wisely in the decisions of your day-to-day life. But here we see at the onset that wisdom does have eternal consequences. It does have eternal consequences in these speeches. So that brings us up to verse 19, and now we see the first of Lady Wisdom's speeches. So Lady Wisdom speaks here from this point on, and from verse 20 to 33. Wisdom calls out in the street. She shouts, so because it's feminine, all of the verbs are feminine towards her. She shouts loudly in the plazas. At the head of the noisy street she calls. In the entrance of the gates of the city she utters her words. How long will you simpletons love naivete? How long will mockers delight in mockery, and fools hate knowledge? If only you will respond to my rebuke, then I will pour out my thoughts to you, and I'll make my words known to you. However, because I called, but you refused to listen, because I stretched out my hand, but no one paid attention, because you neglected all my advice and did not comply with my rebuke, so I myself will laugh when disaster strikes you. I will mock when what you dread comes, when what you dread comes like a whirlwind and disaster strikes you like a devastating storm. When distressing trouble comes upon you, then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will diligently seek me, but they will not find me, because they hated moral knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. They did not comply with my advice. They spurned all my rebuke. Therefore they will eat from the fruit of their way, and they'll be stuffed full of their own counsel. For the waywardness of simpletons will kill them, and the careless ease of fools will destroy them. But the one who listens to me will live in security, and will be at ease from the dread of harm. So there's some interesting things in here, some contrasts, and this brings us to the end of chapter 1 and day 1. So we've got this idea: wisdom is calling out in the streets. It's everywhere. You can't escape wisdom. Wisdom, we'll find out, comes from God. I mean, at the beginning, that's obviously, we've already seen that. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You can see evidence of God everywhere in the world. There is ample opportunity for you to wake up to the fact that God exists. And so wisdom is always calling out to people. More than that, I'm not talking about just nature. Nature is one place that you can see God. Like, you can go outside, you see sunset, you see the night sky. You can see very clearly evidences of creation and a design, and which implies a designer. And so there's none need have any excuse. Romans chapter 1 talks about that the invisible things are clearly seen, but wisdom is diluted through, if God started everything, then everything that's moved away from God, we've all moved away from God, but those who haven't moved so far away still will have remnants of wisdom. And in fact, we see this, we're looking at the wisdom of the Bible, but, you can think of Confucius, you can think of Aesop, you can think of, there's ancient writings similar to, there's very, very different, obviously, but there's similar collections of proverbial wisdom in almost all the ancient cultures, at least the ones that we have extant records from. And the reason for that is because, God's wisdom is still expressed throughout the world. It's still scattered. So wisdom is calling out in the streets. At the head of noisy streets, she calls, there is the call for wisdom. But the key thing that I'm seeing from the people who reject it is that they things like this. It says, for the waywardness of the simpletons, the careless ease of fools. So it's like they don't care, so they reject it out of laziness. You've got to apply yourself. Wisdom is something that you need to apply. The whole idea of the word kokoma is to apply that experiential knowledge. And so when I'm looking here, there's something interesting when you get to verse 28. Or even just before that, I'll go a bit backwards in a second, but in the Bible, we might be able to quote, and you might know those statements where, if you seek me, you will find me, if you search for me with all your heart. And there are other passages about this. We quote those. Jesus is available to be found. But here it says in verse 28, they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will diligently seek me, but they will not find me. So we're almost got a contrast here. Well, why is that? It's because in the time when they should have been preparing, when wisdom was calling out to them, they refused wisdom. And now that they're calling out to wisdom in their time of their trouble, it's too late. Wisdom is something you need to... It's prophylactic. Wisdom is prophylactic. Prophylactic is something you take to prevent yourself from getting sick. When calamity comes, if that's the point at which you're trying to acquire wisdom, it's too late. Because, and that's not to say that if you're going through some horrible things in your life, you may have made a mess of things in a bad way. That's not to say that don't try, don't start. Surround yourself with good people. There's ways to get out of the trouble. I'm saying that, there are exceptions to this. But it's going to be harder. It's going to be so much harder for you to undo the mess that you've made than to have taken steps to not make a mess in the first place. Does that make sense? That's kind of what this is saying. And so Lady Wisdom mocks and laughs, because the people mocked at Lady Wisdom. Now when they come into trouble because of the consequences of their own actions, Lady Wisdom laughs back at them when disaster strikes. And, I know when I've made messes of my life where it feels like the world is laughing. It feels like something is just like, I feel like you might have felt like you're just this big joke. Now, it doesn't mean it's too late, full stop. I'm just saying that it's not the optimal time to be learning. So if your life is in the gutter right now, now's a good time to surround yourself with people who can help you. To surround yourself with people who can come alongside, draw alongside. It's the time to start fearing God and getting the beginning of wisdom as well. But, people can come alongside. But if you're in a time when things are cruising, now is the time to get that wisdom, to either acquire or strengthen your wisdom. Because it will become necessary should disaster hit. And it might prevent disaster from being either hitting or being as bad. That's what I'm getting out of this. So, Proverbs 1, my main takeaways, if I'm to summarize this again, is wisdom is for everyone. Wisdom starts with God, and that the best time to get wisdom is right now. Especially if you're, just in the daily grind. If there's nothing particularly irksome going on in your life, now's the time to focus on wisdom. So that's where I come. If you've got questions or thoughts, feel free to pop them. I'm just going to have a look on my No, some people have been messaging on. No, just liking. So if you wanna interact next time I'm here, just start commenting, start dropping some thoughts in, and I might try and get a few more platforms on. Might try and get Rumble and maybe Instagram on for the next time we go live. So yeah, that's again, Happy New Year, and get into chapter 2 for the 2nd of January, tomorrow. Get yourself a good Bible. You can send me some questions ahead of time. I'll be happy to go through them. But this is how I will be doing it. I hopefully won't be this late if we get a good midday sleep. I won't be tomorrow, though. Tomorrow I'm on another podcast with Peter Dixon. I'm with his podcast talking about something that happened a couple of years ago. But yeah, I will be back hopefully tomorrow afternoon or evening to continue with this. And just for those who are watching, I will be doing my testimony at Border Church on the 11th, so the 11th of this month. And as I've been looking at wisdom and looking at Job and looking at things like that over the last little bit, it's really focused. Now, the reason I'm doing my testimony is because I realized I hadn't done my testimony, or at least, I've scattered my testimony, bits of my testimony through sermons, but I haven't just done my testimony. And someone was asking, could I do that? So I'm going to do a testimony, and it's the name of the testimony, the name of that sermon will be, I want you to have shalom. And hopefully that intrigues you. It's something, it was a direct word from God to me. It's something I heard audibly, and I was terrified. And in awe, but I was terrified at the moment that I heard those words from God, and I will talk all about that. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's okay to be terrified of God. He is a lot bigger than us. He's a lot more powerful than us, and the terror lasts as long as it takes for you to discover how much of a God of love He is. And so I want that for you. I hope that 2025 is going to be an amazing year for you, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Let us end the stream now.